I regret ever laying eyes on my husband. I regret how I first felt loved in his arms. But I don't regret my children. If only I could go back to change the course of time. I first met my husband when I was 18 and he 30. I was a naive girl whose parents had given her the opportunity to be her own person for a few months, so I could experience a little bit more about life before heading to law school. I was drawn to Dominic from the first moment I set my eyes on him. I was enthralled and captivated by his charm, wit, and allure. We first met in the city. I had a part-time job in a bookstore and he was a frequent customer. He was an attorney, smart, and always had a new story to tell or a book to recommend. Our chemistry was undeniable, and before long, I fell in love with him. My parents resented the idea of us dating and told me I would be disowned if I continued to see him. I didn't care. I was in love. I moved out of my parents' house and in with him. He took care of me and told me how much he loved me and how mature I was. He took care of me. Dominic proposed and promised to see me through law school. I was so happy. Within a year of us knowing each other, we were married. Immediately after our wedding, I found out I was pregnant. Dominic was ecstatic, saying how it was proof that our love was meant to be, that we were bringing proof of our love into the world. I wasn't happy. We had planned that I would start school after our wedding, and this pregnancy was going to hinder my plans. He was able to talk me out of my sadness and assured me that after the baby was born, I would rest for a few months, then he would take a year off from work to care for the baby so I could go to school. 5 months into the pregnancy, we found out that we were having twins. My pregnancy was difficult. I couldn't keep any food down. I had lost weight, was anemic and had preeclampsia. But that was just the beginning of my problems. Dominic insisted I do the house chores and cook fresh meals for him every day. On my 6th month, I noticed a different side of Dominic. He became distant, and his charismatic charm took a dark edge. He never laid his hands on me, but he made sure to show how dissatisfied he was. His career as an attorney meant long hours and late nights, but his absences grew more frequent and he became evasive whenever I asked him about work. Things started happening around the house. Bills were left unpaid. He would come home drunk as a skunk, and he would go outside to receive calls. It wasn't until my 8th month that I learned the truth. Dominic was never an attorney. He never owned a home. He had been house-sitting for a friend who had traveled out of the country, and when the friend came back, Dominic refused to give back the home until his friend brought the police. I was 8 months pregnant and homeless with a drunk husband. We moved to an unfinished, empty house on the outskirts of town. The place had no furniture, no warmth, and barely any shelter. But Dominic seemed unbothered, always blaming me for our circumstances. The day I spoke up to him, he laid his hands on me mercilessly. I went into labor. After the twins were born, he drove us far to the northern part of the country, isolating me even further. He brought me and the twins to his parents' tiny 2-bedroom home, where his family accepted us with little warmth or support. I found myself trapped in a place that felt confining like my marriage, far from any help or comfort. I became the live-in maid for his family. Dominic only grew colder, especially as he voiced his disappointment over not having a son. He refused to help with the babies, claiming it was women's work, and his absences became even more frequent. His parents refused to help too, saying I am now mother, so I needed to learn how to do things on my own. My world became a cycle of sleepless nights, early mornings, and endless days tending to my daughters and seeing to the upkeep of the house. Dominic's behavior became more abusive. He and his mom criticized me for everything: my appearance, the state of the house, food not prepared on time, and even our daughter's cries. But I endured it all silently. Leaving wasn't simple. Dominic held control over our finances, though it wasn't much, and he made it clear time and time again that if I ever tried to leave, he would make my life and the lives of my daughters a nightmare. With no family nearby, I felt trapped, fearing both for my safety and the future of my children. 6 years later, and I lit worse for wear. My marriage to Dominic only worsened as he grew more controlling and cruel. He stopped providing for the family entirely, leaving no money behind for basic needs, let alone for the girls' education. I was exhausted from begging for help and pleading with teachers to keep my daughters enrolled without payment. Eventually, with no other options, I decided to homeschool the girls myself. It wasn't easy while having a baby boy that needed your attention. Worse, I found myself pregnant again, with 3 kids and no income. This pregnancy felt more difficult. On the 9th year of our marriage, almost to my due date, I received both good and bad news. My grandmother had died and she had left me an inheritance, a piece of land that she had built on and money on the condition I leave my husband and go back to school. Without telling him about the inheritance, I asked Dominic for a divorce, and he told me if I divorced him, he was going to wash his hands off me and our children. I gladly accepted and made my grandmother's lawyer draft a contract where Dominic relinquishes his rights over our children. He signed the papers and I gathered the little belongings I had and my children and hightailed out of his hometown. I went to my parents first and they received me with open arms. It has been 2 years now. I gave birth to another boy who is now 18 months, my other boy who is 3.5 years, and my girls, 8 years old. They are currently doing well and acing their classes in school. As for me, I'm in law school. Though difficult, I plan to see myself to the end. I heard from someone that Dominic had died in a bar fight. Though inappropriate, I can't help but feel happy. Happy that he can't trace me down and force me and my children back to that kind of life. I'm happy my children are healthy and happy. And that's all I care about. I regret him. I regret him with every fiber of my being, and I also regret the little girl I was who couldn't see the signs that it was wrong for a 30-year-old to be interested in an 18-year-old. Had I known is always at last.